Hey guys, this is Eric Crownover from Nerdy Geek Talk, the source for all your nerdy geeky needs, here with episode 2 of Why Eric Why. And on this episode, we are discussing the question, why don't I love Masterpiece? Now, I know a lot of people love Masterpiece so much, and I understand why. This isn't me saying that there isn't any reasons to love Masterpiece. There certainly is, and I acknowledge that. It's just why I personally do not love it. I like it. Don't get me wrong. I like it. I don't hate it. By no means do I hate it. But I don't love it to the extent that most people do. Now, first off, just to get out of the way, the things that I do like, obviously, um, is the looks. The looks are amazing. They almost always are in both modes, and they're really nice to look at, almost as nice to look at as the statues that are made that are really expensive. But the thing is, and they're not statues. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that they are the equivalent of statues. No, they are below that a step, but they're pretty darn close. Uh, so why wouldn't I like them? It has to do with the fact that they look so perfect in both modes. The thing is, you go from a perfect robot mode to a perfect alt mode. What does that require? One heck of a transformation. And again, not all of them are perfect in both modes, and not all of them have bad transformations, but they take a lot longer to transform than I really like to. And it's not that I like to do often. I have several Masterpiece figures for one, so I don't have as many as a lot of people do, but I do have several. And I enjoy the ones that I have. But the thing is, I don't play around with them a ton because they take a decent amount of time to transform. Again, not an hour. They don't take an hour to transform, but they take a lot more time to transform than just your average toy that you play around with. So you can't really just mess around with them a whole bunch in between in like changing forms and stuff. It's mainly just you play with it as a robot or a little bit, and then maybe transform it. You admire it as a car or beast, whatever it is. Um, and then you transform it back to robot mode and put it on a shelf. That's what most people do. I'm not a huge fan of just putting my stuff on shelves after touching it for a while. I like to have my stuff constantly in a rotation that I mess around with it and stuff. So masterpieces aren't something you fiddle with, and that's not their intention. So that's not a fault to them, but it is just something that I don't particularly love. Another thing I have against Masterpiece is that the series are very limited. Uh, it's almost G1. That's undeniable. I'm not saying it's only G1. We've expanded a bit to Japanese G1 with Star Saber. We do have two Beast Wars characters currently out. A couple versions of Primal, but Primal and Cheetor, and we will be getting Dinobot and presumably Tigertron. Tigertron I will absolutely be buying, and probably a couple more, especially a Megatron. Hopefully a Megatron, but aside from that, they just started Movie Masterpiece. Now, some people might consider that technically a different line. I consider it as part of Masterpiece because it certainly is Masterpiece. We've seen Prime and B have releases. I really want to get those, and Barricade will also be getting a release. Um, but in terms of third party, what we're seeing mainly in that kind of masterpiece, and I won't dwell on third party too long because that is an official masterpiece. I am talking about masterpiece, but third party does make things masterpiece scale. We're starting to get a little bit of expansion, with if you want to consider Galaxy Meteor masterpiece scale. Now it's kind of tough because how does that scale? But uh, we're getting more, and we're getting more movie masterpiece from third party, which I really appreciate. I think that is a really good idea for them, and just in general, that is a really smart move for third party. That's something you should move towards because not only is it not G1, because there's so much G1 in both real masterpiece and third party, which is not actually third party, but um, unlicensed, where you're getting so much G1. It's G1 overload, and that's great for some. That's exactly what a lot of people want. And don't get me wrong, I love G1. I love tons of G1 characters, but I like to have it spread out throughout several series. I like several different series a lot, as much as I like G1. I by no means do I like G1 leaps and bounds more than anything else. I love all of it. So maybe not every single moment, but I love many series to the extent that I also love G1. So I'd love to see them expand more. And again, they are starting to. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they only do G1, but it is about 90% G1 right now. And so I'm saying that they are moving in the right direction in terms of Beast Wars and movie. I would like to see more, but I'd also like them to see more development in those areas. Um, so I think it's great that Masterpiece is starting to grow because for the longest time they were not growing. And that's again, it's not what they were going for, but the fact that everyone's going crazy over Masterpiece, I think it is important that they grow it too. Um, they expand their market to people who want other not other franchises, other series as well. And so I think that Beast Wars movies are certainly two solid and good directions to move in. Those are two of probably the most popular, other than G1, they can make on Masterpiece. I would love to see a bit more. I'm not going to say particularly like name any series I think would be a good direction or anything. Third Party is starting to move towards the uh, Unicron trilogy, stuff like that. RID would be a good move too, but the original, not the new, because it's a bit too recent. But again, I'm not saying that Masterpiece needs to ditch G1, but they've done a whole lot of G1, and it's about time they move on, and they are starting to. So it's not me saying that they aren't. And Third Party is moving on Masterpiece movie a lot quicker than they thought they would. So that is a good thing. But basically, so far we have Transformation is a bit too long to be fun in terms of doing it over and over, which again, it's not meant to. That's just my problem with it. I'm not saying that is a flaw that they messed up on. It's their goal, but it's something that I don't appreciate too much, uh, unless I'm specifically going for a masterpiece that I want character-wise, and then I'll live with the transformation consequences. But in terms of I like to just mess around with toys, they don't really fit that. Um, Two is the fact that they have very limited series. Again, they are fixing that. So that problem is starting to go away, but by no means is it gone yet. Uh, Next is price. Um, Price is crazy on Masterpiece figures. And again, you are buying a high quality product most of the time. There aren't many that I would say are, absolute garbage for what you're paying. But they're getting pretty darn expensive. That partly has to do with the fact that it's Takara, and you're buying an overseas toy, and so that factors into it. But you can buy essentially for the price of one regular size masterpiece, like car or whatever, um, at least a whole wave of Generation toys. Now, again, if you don't like Generation toys, then don't buy a wave of Generation toys. If that one Masterpiece toy makes you more happy, then go for that one Masterpiece toy. But I would much rather have a wave of figures that I can just toy around with, mess around with, and still look good to me. It's just I like their aesthetic. And again, you can get multiple of them versus the one Masterpiece. And it's not Masterpiece's fault because they are going for what they're going for. That's my phone. They're going for a specific quality and scale. And so the scale's the other thing is that the scale's a bit big. And I don't get me wrong, because I like the scale, but it causes problems with the cost because whenever you do any character that isn't small or normal size, you do them bigger, they start getting really expensive really fast. Third party Omega Supreme, you're getting Masterpiece Omega Supremes. Now, they're getting cheaper than I thought they would in terms of the prices that several are coming out for. Especially, I think Weijing is doing their own one, and it looks very cheap and not bad. Not necessarily as good as the others, but not bad. For especially the price I think I've seen it at. But the thing is, when you have a scale that's larger and already in terms of the toys themselves, they're high parts, high quality, so that's already an expensive toy. When you have a larger scale, that's going to make it even more so. And then when you get into larger characters in that larger scale, it just can get impossible at a certain point. And a relevant topic, depending on when you're watching this, is Masterpiece Dinobot. Now, there's some confusion over what the possible pricing could be, but several retailers right now have it listed at $250 US. That is crazy. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you shouldn't buy it. If it's something that means the world to you, then buy it. But a quarter of a grand for a Masterpiece Dinobot, and again, it is going to be, a bigger character. It is very, very complex because, well, I'm assuming it's complex. It's very tricky engineering to get it from its robot mode and dino mode so well. Um, but you just have to take a step back. And I'm guilty of it too because I love these things so much, not necessarily Masterpiece as much as the rest, but the toys in general. You gotta take a step back and look at how much you're spending on the toys themselves. At what point do you draw the line and how much is too much? If a quarter of a grand is not too much for a character that means the world to you and everything, then that's good for you. Buy it. And I don't blame you for that because if I could, I probably would too. But I just can't afford that. So another one of my problems with Masterpiece is that I can't afford a whole lot of it. And that's not necessarily, that's just an unfortunate thing of the fact that they're overseas and also the scale and the quality, which are all the scale and quality I love a lot, but the thing is, for a toy that I'm not gonna mess around with a whole lot, it's gonna look pretty. Um, I don't know if I can justify that much very often. I don't very often. I have very few figures. Um, and the ones I do have, I typically do mess around with a decent amount. I don't transform them nearly as much as I'd like to, but I just don't. It takes up more time, and I like to mess around with lots of figures, so you know, there's that. But so just to recap, the reason I don't like Masterpiece, I don't love Masterpiece. I keep saying don't like. I like Masterpiece, but I don't love Masterpiece. Um, the transformations take too long for my taste. It's not that I don't like the transformations themselves or that they're too hard. Some of them are, but it's just the fact that they take too much time versus how much I can play with, you know, some other toys that from Generations or Robots in Skies, that kind of stuff. And you can just toy around with those in the time that it takes a bunch of those in the time that it takes to transform a single Masterpiece figure. Um, the series that they draw from are very limited. It's basically G1. They are starting to go outside their comfort zone. Third parties also going out their comfort zone a bit more too because they're expanding to movie. They haven't done Beast Wars yet, which surprise. Well, some third parties have done Beast Wars, but I wouldn't necessarily say that a lot of those are necessarily fitting the Masterpiece aesthetic. Maybe the scale, but I see a lot of third party Beast Wars products as being mostly. I would put them with my Generations, but again, if you consider it with your Masterpiece, that's fine. It's whatever works for you, but basically third party is showing promise in movie figures. I think they look very, very good from what we've seen of the several that have been announced almost out of nowhere, especially from the new movie, like the Masterpiece Hot Rod. That is a crazy fast development on that design. I'm really impressed and really looking forward to that along with the lockdown. But the lockdown, it's been years since that movie came out, so I mean, that makes sense. But Hot Rod, that is fast. But either way, Masterpiece is limited in its series, but it is starting to grow. So that is something I will give you if you want to argue that, is that it's not that they are just G1. They are starting to expand, but they are still at least 90% G1. Um, the price, the price is just really hard for me. Other people in general, but again, you have to look at how much you're spending on toys. If all you're buying is a Masterpiece every couple months and you don't buy any other toys, then that's totally fine. If you buy a ton of toys and you have a ton of money, then yeah, that's fine too. But can you afford Masterpiece? Not everyone can, and for what it is, I can't justify that money either. And lastly, but certainly not leastly, certainly but not least, last but not least, geez, is the scale. The scale is great for a lot of characters. It is not great for a lot of large characters, which plays into the price issue because once you get to that scale, once you have certain characters, some of them are just too big. Like, to do, you can't do a Metroplex. This is too big. You can't have a Metroplex. Um, and you know, with the large figures too, the scale is just you can't afford a lot of those large figures. Companies can't afford to make some of those larger figures, although a third party is doing tons and tons of huge, huge characters, combiners, and Omega Supreme, but a lot of people can't afford to buy them. So we'll see how long they keep making big Masterpiece figures before they move on to other things. I'm also curious what other series they move on to, both legitimate Masterpiece and third party. I'm curious to see where Masterpiece goes, but those are the reasons that I don't just love Masterpiece unconditionally, like a lot of people do. And again, I do not blame anyone. I don't think it's a bad thing at all. If you love Masterpiece, then go love Masterpiece. That's totally fine. I'm not saying this is why you shouldn't love Masterpiece. I am just saying this is why I don't personally love Masterpiece. I like Masterpiece a lot. I have several Masterpiece figures and I love the look of them. They are gorgeous, some of the most gorgeous toys ever. But my favorite toys are just a different balance of price, fun, that kind of stuff, complexity. It's again an aesthetic personally, but Masterpiece is certainly at one end of the scale where it's perfect aesthetic for G1 and super super expensive versus you can get things that aren't G1 at all, super super cheap and super super not articulated. Um, but I like stuff in the middle. We'll get to what my favorite toy line is. A lot of people can probably guess it's Generations, but yeah, the next episode is going to be why do I love Generations? And again, don't get me wrong, I don't hate Masterpiece. I like Masterpiece a lot. This is just why I don't love it. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions or any comments, if you think there's anything I got wrong in terms of, I mean, they're mostly opinions, but anything you disagree with me on, then totally let me know. You can find me at Eric Crowbar on Twitter, at Aramis Prime. Most other places I don't use a whole lot other than Instagram. I mean, I'm in the Transformers Facebook groups too. If you follow me on any of those places, I post hashtag Despots every day, which can be interesting. I might have some figures that you've forgotten about, you don't know, or maybe a ton you have, and seeing one makes you want to dig it up and play with it. So I post a different one every day. If you're interested in that, definitely check it out. It's fun. I really like it. I really recommend it too, to just play with at least one toy a day, just to relieve some stress if for nothing else. So thanks for watching. Bye.